Welcome to our International Mother Language Poetry Cafe from Litteraturscentrum Uppsala. Every occasion, we invite one or more poets from different language, culture, and background. Today, we have a guest from Kenya. Before we present our guest, I would like to present myself. My name is Anisur Rahman. I am a Bengali Swedish poet and playwright working for Litteraturscentrum Uppsala. And today we have our friend from Kenya. He teaches at a university there, and he writes poetry, books for children, theater plays, novel short stories. He translates, and he also leads literary festivals in Kenya. Welcome, Christopher Okemwa. Today, we'll have some short discussions with him about poetry, translations, literary situation in Kenya, and the state of mother languages in the world, particularly in Kenya and Africa. And meanwhile, in the discussions, he will also read his poems in English and his mother language, Swahili. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Would you like to tell us how and why did you begin to write particularly poetry?
Let me say I began writing poetry when I was 14 years old, and I realized that I had a talent in writing poetry, and I discovered it when I was in Form 2 in secondary school. And let me say that my teacher, who was teaching me that time, is the one who discovered that talent. And she told me that I was going to be a great writer in future, going by what she had read in my composition. So I started writing poetry, and I've realized that poetry is very important. Poetry, to me, is a powerful tool which can be used to communicate. It's also powerful in terms of bringing messages across to people. For example, if there is an issue in the community or in the society, poetry is a powerful tool to communicate that message. For instance, right now, I'm compiling an anthology called I Can't Breathe. This is dedicated to the killing of George Floyd, the Black American who was killed by the US police. So this anthology brings all the voices from around the world to talk and condemn the racial injustices in America and the rest of Europe. So I believe strongly that this anthology is going to become a powerful tool of communication to the authorities in Europe and in America particularly to stop racial injustice and racial discrimination. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that I believe that poetry is very essential to humanity. It's an essential element in any society. It is a powerful genre compared to all other genres like fiction, like novel writing, theater, oral poetry, and so on and so forth. It is really, really powerful. And I also believe that poetry is therapeutic. It's medicinal. It actually brings healing to people who are sick, who are heartbroken, people who are oppressed, people who are under trauma of some sorts. For instance, I am also compiling an anthology of poetry called COVID-19 Diary, which comprises of COVID-19 related poetry. And this poetry anthology has received over 800 poems from around the world. And I believe strongly that this anthology is going to be a healing process for some people who are going to read the poems. And I believe that people have sent in their poems as a way of healing the world of coronavirus, of healing those who are bereft by their beloved, those who are bereft, who lost their beloved ones to the virus, and so on and so forth. I also believe that poetry itself can bring love and peace to the entire world, especially to those people or societies in the world who have been oppressed or who have faced war and skirmishes. and can bring peace and reconciliation. Communities like Vietnam, Palestine, Africa, Catalonia, Afrique, all these communities have been faced by war and problems and challenges of politics and inter-country war, you know. And I believe strongly that if poetry is introduced in such countries as it has been, or as it has been going on, it has that healing power among its people, among its readers, among its children and generations that are there. Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome. Would you like to share with us what is the state of modern Kenyan poetry today?
Oh, modern poetry in Kenya is actually more oriented towards performance.
Yeah.
The written tradition is there, but most poets, who are mostly young people, tend to do performance poetry, to go on stage and perform their poems, to write their poems for performance, and therefore leaning towards performance more than written performance. And I believe strongly that this performative nature of Kenyan poetry is influenced by the African oral tradition.
Okay.
African oral tradition did not have the written part of it, and I believe that Kenyan poets actually try to are influenced by the African oral tradition, and their poetry tends to also involve some elements of hip hop and reggae and Rastafarianism. All these different genres actually influence Kenyan poetry. And you just find that by the end of the day, we can call it hybrid poetry. It's a mixture of Western, of reggae, of hip hop, of African oral traditions, and other elements which they borrow from other poetry traditions and poetry cultures from around the world. So generally, I can conclude by saying that Kenyan poetry is a hybrid form of poetry. Thank you.
You have mentioned about oral poetry also. Is there any difference between oral poetry and the performance poetry in Kenya today?
Between oral poetry and?
The performance poetry, poetry for scene or stage. Performance poetry.
Okay, performance poetry on stage, there may not be much difference, but you see the oral poetry used to involve instruments, traditional instruments, and it also used not to be written down. But performance poetry in Kenya is written down first. It's a written text, which is carried to the stage to be performed. So there is a difference between traditional oral poetry and performance poetry. The reason why I'm saying there's a difference is because performance poetry in Kenya can involve hip hop, hip hop and reggae, you know, and Rastafarianism in it, especially the body language on stage. But the oral African poetry used to be purely performance. There was no prior written text before performance. It was totally oral. Thank you.
Thank you. We know in Kenya there are 69 ethnic minority languages in addition to 2 official languages, Swahili and English. I would like to know what is the state of ethnic minority languages in Kenya and also the writing in those languages.
Yeah, I think in Kenya we have 42 tribes. So we have 42 languages. And Swahili and English may not be a part of those 42 tribes. But Swahili is spoken. Sorry.
Would you like? Yes. Could you fix your camera? Okay, now it's okay. Now fine.
Yes, I'm saying that in Kenya, we do have 42 tribes, which speak 42 languages. And Kiswahili and English is actually the additional two. Kiswahili is spoken by the tribes living near the coast in Kenya and by all other Kenyans, and by extension, the entire East Africa.
Excuse me, go a little down. So, fix your camera.
I'm sorry?
No, fine.
That's okay?
Yes, okay. Yeah.
Yes, I'm saying that in Kenya we have 42 tribes, and they speak a language of their own, so which means we have a total of 42 tribes in Kenya. And then we also have English and Kiswahili, which is added on those.
Your camera is not working, just audio.
Is also spoken among those 42 tribes. So what I would like to say is that most writers in Kenya do not write in their mother tongue. So which means those 42 tribes may not be presented in any artwork or in any literary works. This is because most writers in Kenya believe that they may not get enough readership if they write in their mother tongues. So mostly they write in English and they write in Swahili, because Swahili and English can be able to get large readership as compared to their own languages. Yes.
Oh, all right. Another thing,
yeah.
How would you look back to your colonial past, both in language and also in writing and social life?
Yeah, let me say that colonialism affected Kenya very much, just as much as it affected all other African countries or any colonized nations, be it Haiti, be it whichever country that was colonized. So I can say that colonialism destroyed a lot of many things in Kenya, including the culture, including our language, which is very important. And you can be able to see these days that actually colonialism left a lot of destruction, especially in terms of language, because most of those 42 tribes in Kenya, they are losing their languages simply because they feel like English is more superior. They believe that English is prestigious. So they go in for English language, they go in for Swahili language, and they have left back, or they have left behind, their own original indigenous languages. And these languages, once they are not used, and once they are not practiced, and once they are not used in novels, in poetry, in any kind of writing, they will become extinct. And very soon, we may have only Swahili and English being spoken in Kenya, which is quite a very dangerous way to go. And therefore, when I look back at colonial past, I find that quite a lot of African traditions, African culture, African languages started getting spoiled and started getting destroyed. And very soon, in the next 50 years, most of the languages in Kenya may become extinct, especially my mother tongue, Ekegusi, which we speak here in my community in the western part of Kenya, might become extinct. This is because we do not have writers who are writing it. And the new generation, the young people who are growing up, do not know how to speak my mother tongue. They do not know how, they cannot read my mother tongue in books. They cannot be able to express themselves fluently and adequately in my mother tongue. So there is a big danger, and most of these 42 languages in Kenya might become extinct very soon. And this is as a result of colonial past, as a result of colonization, which took place in my country. And you see, when the colonials came to Kenya, he made Africans, especially the Kenyans, believe that his language was superior. The English was superior, was prestigious to speak in English. So this kind of tendency, this kind of attitude grew among the Kenyan elites, the Kenyan people, the Kenyan school-going children. It grew up among teachers, and this resulted into thinking that English is more superior, making people think that if your children know how to speak good English, they are more clever. And therefore, English has been promoted more in Kenya. I remember when I visited Northern Ireland some years back, one American poet asked me, how do you write your poems? I told him I write them in English. He asked me again, do you write them in your mother tongue before you translate them? I told him, no, I just write them. I write my poems in English. Then he went further to say, no, you must be writing in your mother tongue before you translate. I told him, no, I just think in English, and sometimes I write my poems in English. And then also, of course, I can translate some of them, but not always. Sometimes I can just think in English and then write my poems. So I can say that English or colonial past has inflicted the African culture, has inflicted the African languages, and finally, it has inflicted the way we think, the way we do things, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Welcome. And would you like to read some of your poems? Not all, one or two. Then we will come back to discussion again.
Yeah, I would like to read one poem in my mother tongue. It's called Okemwa.
Yeah.
And then after I finish, I will translate it into English.
Right.
The poem is about coronavirus, a new phenomenon in the community, a new disease, something very strange.
Set your camera again.
Sorry?
Set your camera again. So I just see you some part of your face here. No, down. Now fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay?
It's okay.
Yes, let me read the poem.
Read the poem from the beginning.
Sorry?
Read the poem again from the beginning.
Yes, in Ekegusi language. Gekeiga yatochaire corona yatochaire embe oekona kogusa. Gekeiga yatochaire corona yatochaire embe oekona kogusa. Embe oekona kogusa e baba, embe oekona kogusa e baba, embe oekona kogusa, embe oekona kogusa. Inwe murwari tabarwaire, more me korwen koroime, echine chindoto chigoita. Inwe murwari tabarwaire, more me korwen koroime, echine chindoto chigoita. Echine chindoto chigoita e baba, echine chindoto chigoita e baba, echine chindoto chigoita, echine chindoto chigoita. Omoto kuwatia neriberera rinyinge, no wasimora bwire. Omoto kuwatia neriberera rinyinge, no wasimora bwire. No wasimora bwire baba, no wasimora bwire baba, no wasimora bwire, no wasimora bwire. Uraya chingera wanyangerota. Thank you.
Would you like to read it in English?
Yes, I'm going to do it in English.
Yeah.
The title is The Thing That Is Lacking About. What thing is this that lacks about? It is the virus. Like the wind, it will pass over. Like a wind, it will blow over. Like a wind, like a wind. The sick, sickening, take heart. It's one of those bad dreams that in the morning you forget. One of those bad dreams that in the morning you forget. The headache, fever, the sneezing will subside. Indeed will subside. True, no trace will remain. No trace will remain. Oraya, the chant of chants. Ta. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Would you like to set your camera again? Okay, now fine. Yeah. Next thing is, what is the publishing process in Kenya? Is it growing or not? And publishing, I mean also literary magazine and books.
Yeah, the situation in Kenya in terms of publishing is very wanting. This is because most publishers tend to publish school texts, which can bring money and which can do business, but they are not very keen to publish poetry. This is because poetry cannot sell. many people do not read poetry, so therefore they cannot publish poetry. And if they have to publish poetry, then they have to publish anthologies, an anthology which can contain many names, which can contain varied themes, which can contain different voices. That's what they can do. And normally they can publish anthologies which can be read in schools which can buy books, and then they can get business and they can get money. But they are not very keen in publishing poetry, individual poems, you know. They cannot promote individual poets in Kenya. This is because if they publish those books, those poetry books from individual poets, those books cannot sell because people do not read poetry. All they want is to read for exams, pass the exams and get jobs. But they are not very keen to do extra reading outside schoolwork, especially students. They are not very keen to read for the sake of reading. They are not going to read to grow in poetry or to read for leisure. They are going to read to pass the exams and then get a job and get money. So poetry publication is really hard, very, very hard to get a publisher who is going to publish your poems. And we only have one publisher who came from Canada called Okemwa Ink Publisher, who is actually keen in publishing poetry. And he has promoted poetry in Kenya since he came in around 7 years or 10 years ago. And he has made most of us to be published. He has made most of us who have poems to be published. Otherwise, the mainstream publishers in Kenya, those who have stayed in the market for long, only publish school textbooks, which can bring money. Otherwise, most publishers are not keen to publish poetry. This is because poetry is not popular. Poetry cannot bring money. Poetry cannot have big readership. Poetry cannot is not recognized as much as it is in Western countries. Thank you.
All right. Would you like to comment on some important contemporary Kenyan writers, including Ngugi wa Thiong'o?
Yeah, Ngugi wa Thiong'o is one leading writer from Kenya. He mainly writes novels, and we have other writers as well, but they are not as prominent, as popular as Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And those who were with Ngugi wa Thiong'o those days when he started writing, most of them are not alive. Maybe they could be popular like he is, but they are not alive. They have died, you know. The people whom he started writing with while he was in Makerere University, while he was teaching at the University of Nairobi, most of those writers, like Okot Pitek, who has written songs of Lawino, songs of so many cultural poetry. Some of those are not living. They are no longer alive. So the only person who is alive, who is a writer, who is living from those past colonial time is Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And we have not had another writer as good as he is. But we do have poets. We do have Tony Mochama, who is a great poet, but who writes mostly performance poetry, and who writes who uses hybrid language, you know, a mixture of Swahili, English, mother tongue, and all this kind of hybrid language. And we also have other younger upcoming poets, like we have Ngwatilo Mawio, we have Stawa Namwalye, we do have Peter Saisi, young people around 30 years who are great poets who are coming up in Kenya. And they are going to make a name of themselves in future. And I believe that their poetry is very strong. Their writing is really good. And one time, once they are known, once they become popular, they are going to be famous and they are going to be strong poets around the world. And then we also have other poets like let me say Cliff Oyugi, who is a student but also writing good poems. We also have poets like Harrison Omambia, poets who are actually young but coming up and writing very good poetry. Then we have, in the part of fiction, we do have Ole Kulet, a novelist who is actually who is actually established and who has written many novels, especially something to do with tradition, African traditions. And one of his novels called Blossoms of the Savannah is a set book in secondary school in Kenya. And it's such a nice, very good, very high standard novel. So we do have many poets and also many novelists in the country. And I believe that these are new generation writers, and they are going to be known in the near future. The only thing that is missing is for them to be promoted. They do not have publishers who can publish their works so that they get to be known out there. And their works may not be known in other countries. Maybe by now, most of them could be recognized and get known, and maybe even get published outside there. So what is actually missing in Kenya is publicity of our upcoming poets and upcoming novelists. Thank you.
Certainly. Would you like to read some of one of your poems in English and your mother language? Then we'll come back to discussion.
One poem called Omubero, that is The Wind. I'm going to read it in my mother tongue, then I'll read it in English later on for that. Omubero nigo okogusa, oeta rinanigati, oheyana, ochura, osunyoria, ogotera okwororo, gokogera twarora obobisi gore asemete, utari kororekana, bwebisetie eyanga yebikone. Okonyo igwera kwanyo igwera aria, olekerase, okoba kwaye, okororekana, ase ikeramba uti, okwemina gocheigoro. Amaraba yebuse, agwa ase amagwa, ase chimbago, ase obunyansi igoro, nabo okonyo igwera isiko, okogusa, chirongi chianga cheime, esi ebisindereo, chisati, okosungura korwase etagachi. Yairurukia gocheigoro, nabo okonyo igwera ase tinyoro igoro, riguhaka chindoe, na guhaka chinkobi, kerama igoro, ekero inyasaye yo, egenderete gweta. Omubero oyo nechinchera chiaye, chinyinge, chigweta enseyonsi, nigo okorenta omwaga bwembura ekenyitita, yaseberekania amare, yanya reria igoro weta, okokumba emete, okonyegeria ebimeria, enkoba yaka, yamesa, embura ya gokainse. Turi kororekana, chiguru chiaye, okobogoria emerindo, ya nyancha, yanyakerania engegu ya mache, nechinguru chinene, nobororo. Otigengegu ebiogoto byogukumya ebikone igetare igoro tiga eguse oete omubero oyo tiga oguse oete ensengima amo nogo sigikia nogo sibole. Thank you.
Thank you. Since you are also a translator and
in English,
you also teach comparative literature, would you like to tell us about the state of translation in Kenya, and also what do you mean by comparative literature in academia, and what do you teach there?
Yeah, about translation, let me say that translation is not developed in Kenya. This is because of scarcity of resources, and also because we are still in the third world country, whereby some of these things like translation is not so developed. This is because we do not have enough of writers who are also academic and who are into writing of poetry and who are actually having writing as a full-time job. Most of the upcoming writers actually do something else. Maybe most of them are teachers, some of them are lecturers like I am, and they may not have writing as a full-time career. Therefore, I believe strongly that because of this, that's the reason why translation is not something very big in Kenya. It's not something very, very prominent. And therefore, very little can be spoken about translation in Kenya.
All right. Are Kenyan readers how much familiar with our poet, Bengali poet, Nobel laureate in
Sorry, can you
1913, Rabindranath Tagore? How
come
much
again?
are you familiar with our poet, Bengali poet, Rabindranath Tagore, who got Nobel Prize for Poetry in 1913?
Oh, you want to say whether we have a Bengali poets known in Kenya?
Yeah, including Rabindranath Tagore.
Sorry, come again?
Rabindranath Tagore.
No, I don't think we know that one in Kenya.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And how much do you study Swedish poetry or familiar with Swedish poetry? For example, Thomas Tranströmer.
Oh, come again?
Thomas Tranströmer.
No, we don't read that one.
Okay. Anyway, it was very good discussion. Thank you for your time. Would you like to read one more poem before we end our discussion?
I think that's all the poems I had. Let me not read another one now.
Or we can leave the discussion here.
Yeah. Let's read the discussion here.
You're
right.